Well, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada has for many years been at the forefront of tackling issues of faith in our Canadian political and cultural world. The EFC is in the process of making some changes, and we want to discuss some of these as well as some of the current issues that we're facing in Canada. We are joined today by David Guretzki, the Executive Vice President of the EFC, soon to be the future president. Welcome to Bridge City News, David. Great to have you on.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Okay, so for any viewers who may be unfamiliar with the EFC, can you first of all explain what your organization is all about?
Sure, I'd love to do that. We're the National Association of Evangelical Denominations and post-secondary schools, ministry organizations, and hundreds of congregations. And we do various types of things. We have 3 centers that we work out of. We have a center for ministry and ministry partnership and innovation, and we do collaboration. What can we do together that we couldn't do apart? We do public policy work out of our Center for Faith and Public Life, advocacy work and matters of life issues, religious freedom issues. We intervene in court cases. We've been in over 30 Supreme Court cases over the years. And we also have a Center for Research on Church and Faith, where we look at trends in religious attitudes in Canada and various types of issues that are facing the church. So those are our primary. And then we produce resources out of that. We have a couple magazines. Faith Today is our bi-monthly magazine, and we produce other kinds of resources like podcasts and webinars and digital media and so on.
Wow, sounds like you guys are definitely involved in a lot. Now, some viewers may know the name Bruce Clemenger, who has served for many years as the EFC president. So tell us what changes are going to be taking place for both Bruce and yourself. I may have given it away at the beginning of the interview.
For me, of course, as of January 31st, I'll be taking up the challenge of becoming president and CEO of the EFC on January 31st, 2023.
Congratulations.
And so thank you very much. Looking forward to it. I'm sure there's lots of challenges forward as well.
Definitely.
And Bruce has been with the organization for 30 years, and 20 years of that as president. And he's going to be moving into a senior role. He's staying on with the EFC, focusing his work really on as a senior ambassador, and he's going to be focusing his work really in his area of expertise, which is like public policy and faith and legal issues and so on. So he'll write and speak and continue to engage on the Hill.
Okay, so maybe let's touch base on some of the current issues that EFC is working on. So the rapid expansion of MAID, of course, medical aid in dying, is raising some concerns. As of March of 2023, people with mental illness alone will be eligible for assisted dying in Canada. So how will this impact people with mental health concerns and those who love them?
Well, I think that the biggest concern with MAID being opening up to people with just mental illness alone is it's kind of sending a signal that if they have need for treatment for various types of therapies, this now becomes an out. This becomes a way for them because we know that mental illness issues take a long time to deal with often, and they're complicated and they're not simple to work through. And so, unfortunately, I think that what this does is it basically gives permission to mentally ill people to say, well, if there's no solution, there's always MAID. Right. And I think that the other issue is, as we know, many people with mental illnesses already face suicidal thoughts and ideations. And so that's the challenge. Like already, if someone has a mental illness where suicide is part of their experience, suicidal thoughts is part of their experience, this is kind of opening a door to kind of give permission to that. And I think what we're doing is we're creating a bit of a paradox here, because on the one side, on mental illness, we're very much concerned about preventing suicide. And so there are lots of people that we work hard to, give treatment and therapy so that they will stay away from suicide. But then on the flip side, we're opening the door to other people who just by virtue of mental illness alone might say, well, I don't want to go through the hard work of trying to solve this issue. Mm-hmm. And so MAID's a good option for me. So it's a bit of a paradox in our society. Suicide prevention on one side, and yet we're opening the door for it to make it a lot easier for others.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is a paradox. It's so ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think the saddest thing is that the experts tell us, the medical experts tell us that, those people, especially with depression, That's a large clinical depression is a large issue amongst people with mental illness, and the experts are saying that like with proper treatment, most we can resolve that issue within 6 months to 12 months of medication and therapy. But the way the regime is set up right now, if someone is depressed and suicidal, there's only a 90-day waiting period for them, and that's often not enough time to take care of the problem.
Wow. Okay. So, what would you say to those who argue that this expansion is a positive thing? What is it about mental illness on its own that perhaps could end up placing vulnerable people at unnecessary risk of death?
Maybe a lot of people may not realize that about 1 in 5 Canadians will face some kind of mental health challenge in their life. That means like 1 out of 5 people in Canada are facing those kinds of challenges. And I can't imagine that it's a good thing to say, well, we're sorry, we really can't help you. We don't have enough resources to help you. And so we've opened the door here for you just to end your life as a result. We have to do better than that. We have to be able to admit that it's a huge problem, that we're going to have to put resources to it. We're going to have to make sure that we're taking care of people with mental health issues. But by opening this door, I really think that this is actually taking the pressure off of our governments to say, well, this is an easy way for us to deal with mental illness. We don't have to deal with as many people then if they opt for MAID. And I think the other really not positive thing about this is I I expect, and we've already seen stories of this, is that this is a really a family dividing issue. So you can have someone in a family who's suicidal, mentally depressed, perhaps, and who perhaps wants to end their life. And some family members are saying, no, 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 we don't want you to, we want you to stay around.
Right.
And others are saying, this is just too much of a burden and it's going to divide families. And we're actually seeing evidence of that already. So we've got to do better. I think the statement we need to be saying to people with mental health issues is, you matter. You matter. And it's hard for me to imagine how medical assistants in dying for mental health issues is saying you matter.
Oh, so true. So, David, what kinds of specific supports and treatment options would you like to see put in place instead?
Well, one of the things, even given that the regime is going to likely go for, it is already legislated to start in March 2023. We're very concerned that there's only a 90-day waiting period. And so that alone is insufficient amount of time for someone to be properly assessed if they've never really been assessed before, to gain options for treatment. And so it's certainly a much longer waiting time. A call really for greater access to for people to mental health resources. There's lots of people who maybe don't have insurance systems that pay for psychologists and counselors and therapists,
Hmm.
and so they're left without. And so the people who can maybe afford it or have insurance to cover it, they're maybe covered. But even for those who are covered, there's long, especially after COVID, there's long waiting lists to see specialists, mental health specialists.
Hmm.
And so, we're calling for better access, better resourcing, and then of course, from a Christian perspective, I mean, we as Christians we have to step up, and we have to realize that we have to learn more about mental health issues. We have to learn how to support those who are going through it, and I think churches can have a great role to play in helping out in these situations.
Do you know if once that person gets put on that 90-day waiting period, do they are they then given access to all kinds of extra supports and therapists, or is it just kind of like, okay, you've made your decision, that's that?
No, I mean, I think there's always a potential for those accesses, but there's no guarantee that once the person has made that decision, that they're going to be motivated to access that. That's I think our real problem.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I understand that a special committee of MPs and senators have been meeting to consider whether youth under 18 should have access to euthanasia and assisted suicide. So, how likely is this, and how young of an age are we talking here?
Well, in reality, in the medical system already, there is already a category called mature minor. And so even in the current system, there are exceptions where a youth, say between 12 and 18 years old, can make medical decisions on for themselves
I
for
can't
other
even
medical
believe that that's a
issues,
thing.
right? Well, yeah, and so even like with terminal patients, maybe with cancer and so on. So a lot of it is judged based upon whether the individual, indicates an ability, an emotional and a mental ability, a cognitive ability to actually understand these things. So that category already exists in the system.
Mm.
So almost certainly, with MAID being subsumed under as a medical process or a medical procedure in Canada, it's almost certain that that's coming in Canada, and so it's not law yet. Thankfully, it's not law yet, but so there is still a chance for our voices to be heard on this. But it's almost certainly to come into play. And when we're talking about mature minors, there at the Senate hearing committees on MAID, there was a division of opinion. Early on in the process, the Canadian Pediatric Society was arguing against opening up MAID to those under 18. But many physicians, and there's no consensus on this, many physicians were arguing for as young as 12, and some were saying there should be no limit on or no lower limit on how low a person can go,
Oh.
as long as they can be shown to understand what they're doing.
Oh my gosh! And how do you even qualify that in terms of what they're thinking and how mature they are? It
That's
almost
right.
brings me to tears just thinking about these young kids going through this. Absolutely.
And that is that is a big part of it. Is it does depend so much upon the opinions of a few people about whether the individual is mature enough to understand what they're going through. Not to mention the kind of traumas and issues that they're perhaps facing, especially if they're going through some kind of medical procedures or under heavy medication. It's so difficult to really know how well we confidently be able to judge that this young person, this 12-year-old, really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. Now, David, what kind of feedback are you getting on this issue from mental health groups and from physicians themselves? Is there a majority in favor of this?
There there doesn't seem to be any consensus emerging. There's several different camps. There's sort of a wide open camp that is all for MAID in general, and then of course there's some who are much more open to it for youth under 18. So there's really no consensus on mental health professionals. Disability groups, indigenous groups, many of those types of groups have actually expressed deep concern about how both MAID and eligibility for youth is really puts young people and vulnerable peoples at risk. So people without a social safety net, a good social safety net, people without the resources, people who are perhaps in isolated places and don't have that support, may just seems like a really easy option for them.
What about the physicians themselves? Do they currently have their conscious rights protected when it comes to MAID, or are they required to either participate or to refer to another doctor who does in fact perform MAID?
That's a great question. So in Canada, there is no conscience protection level at the level of the federal law because health is all regulated by the provinces. So each province has their own kind of set of rules about how conscientious objectors are dealt with. In Canada right now, most provinces have some allowance or significant allowance for those who object to participation in MAID, but Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia are still requiring even objecting physicians to provide what they call effective referral. So even if they object to personal, and they're not going to be forced to engage in MAID personally or directly, in those provinces, those doctors are still obligated by their professional colleges to give an effective referral,
Wow.
which means they have to make sure that the patient is handed off to someone else to ensure that this is done.
Right.
And for many doctors, that's tantamount to aiding and abetting in a murder.
For
And
sure.
so
Yeah, absolutely. Really quick, what can viewers who maybe don't agree with this do to stop the expansion of MAID? How can they practically get involved? This may be one of those issues that gets overlooked in our busy world, right?
Right. So I think we have to talk about it more amongst our communities and our churches. I think a lot of Christians still are actually unaware even about this. I talk to people regularly who are actually even surprised that we even have MAID in Canada. And then others are not even aware about things like the coming opening up to mental illness. So there needs to be a lot more education. We certainly need to pray, need to keep praying about this. From an advocacy perspective, I think that it always is good to contact your MP and express your reservations and your concerns about the expansion of MAID. Although the March 23 deadline is actually coming, and that's already in legislation, I think that we're seeing more and more stories of people receiving MAID that people are alarmed by, that they are receiving MAID. And so I think there can be a concerted effort to call for more safeguards to be put in place. That still is possible. And I think we all need to learn to ask the question, like, how can we volunteer? Palliative care is one of the main kind of ways we can counter MAID, because a lot of people don't have access to to palliative care. And I think that we also have to advocate not only for restrictions on MAID, but we have to advocate both federally and provincially for better access to palliative care. Only about 30% of Canadians actually have good access to palliative care. And so if we're in that position, if someone gets into that position, even if they wanted it, they can't get it.
Looks like we're out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, David, and for enlightening us on this incredibly fascinating topic.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great being here.
Absolutely. David Guretzki is the Executive Vice President and soon to be the new CEO and President of EFC.